Okay, and then let me share the screen. You can see, right? So in the last session, we covered the pipes, right? And filtering data with pipes and basically adding some um, transformation with pipes, be it lowercase, uppercase, title case, and if you want any custom scenarios where you want to do any extra operations on in the template on your data, basically you'll be using pipes, right? So that part we covered, and async pipe we did not cover because this topic will be dependent on subjects and observables. Okay, once that is done, you'll be able to understand this. So from now we can basically move on to the services. Okay, and today we'll create a service and we'll basically see how it is going to work. And after that, other topics are not so important except the routing and forms. Everything else is just easy. Okay. So a service is basically a reusable code meaning the business logic. Basically, we saw reusable template, which is basically a component, right? Component is basically a reusable template and a code basically. But we cannot write all the code in components. Components are just basically use it only for UI creation. Okay, basically components will have a lot of responsibility, right? They have responsibility of grouping template, CSS, and the business logic, some of it at least. Okay, and injecting any services into it, and then binding variables with the template, right? So basically the data binding will be there, two-way binding. So all these responsibilities has to be taken care by the component. So to reduce some burden on the components, they created the services, Angular services. The service is nothing but a TypeScript class, but what it does is basically it will have all of your business logic or business features you are going to write, right? So the business, the core logic part will be in services. And another advantage of services is they are available across your application. Once you create, then basically you can reuse that service across the application, across modules. Okay, that is another advantage. So let's say if you write a function to show some alert or to call some backend API to get data, so that service you can use in any other module or in any other component to achieve that functionality. So that is another main advantage of services. So services basically, if you have a piece of code which is being reused by a couple of components, then basically you can create a service. It may not be service calling a backend service, or it may not be service calling showing the alerts, right? It can be as simple as the loading icon. Like whenever you click on something, some button, basically if that page is like taking more time to load, right, that time we show a loading icon, animation icon, right? So it can be that service as well. So whenever you click, we are going to basically call the service to show the loading icon. Once the data comes back from the server, then we'll stop the loading. So basically user will see there is some action happening in the background, right? So it's a basically um, making our application more interactable, right? So if I click on, let's say, this built-in pipes, now it is immediately refreshing here. But if it is taking some time to get data from the server, but we are not showing anything, we are showing just blank page, then user will not have any idea what is going on, right? So basically we have to show some loading icon there. So for that also we can use these services. So anything you can think of can be reusable. You can create a service and move that code to that service methods. Okay. So you see here in the simple image, right? So basically this is a service where you have a code, and the services will not have templates. Okay. Services will not have templates. Services will not have CSS. Service is a pure TypeScript class. It will have a constructor. It will have fields. It will have methods. That's it. Nothing else. So I created a service here, and basically this service can be used across all the components. Okay, so and this app has 3 components. I'm able to use this service in 3 components. So this is the main focus of services. Okay, now let's move on to the next session. So how a service will look like. Okay, just service will look like a pure TypeScript class except this decorator. Okay, earlier we saw at that component and directive component, and then a pipe component, pipe decorator, and what else we saw? Only these 3, right? Components, directives, pipes. Yeah. So for service, it will be injectable. And basically, we are telling Angular that this class is injectable in other components or other directives or other pipes, right? So this injectable is an indication that wherever it finds the injectable, the Angular finds the injectable, it will take this class and create an instance, like create an object, and then it will keep it ready in the memory, okay, in the Angular framework. So whenever we need this framework, anywhere in a component or anywhere in a directive, we can just inject it into the constructor. Okay, that way we don't have to create a object by let example service equals to new example service. So that part will be taken care by Angular itself. We just have to use the existing object. Okay, so little bit more about this syntax. Basically, there is a provider, right? Provided in operator field. Sorry, so provided in field is taking root as a input, root as a value. So what does this mean is when it has a root value, the string, we are basically telling Angular framework that this service, meaning this service will be accessible across the application. Okay, across the application. And it doesn't matter, let's say you create another module which is entirely different. This service is created in different module, but because of this root is here, it can be accessible in other module also. So how Angular will handle these services? You can create any number of services, okay, just by running that ng command line. Then once this service is created, because of this injector syntax or the decorator, the service will be taken and it will create new instance or new object of the service, and it will keep in the injector framework. It is a part of the Angular. Okay, so it will basically create an object of service A, hello service, service C, service D. All these 4 service it kept inside the that injector framework. Okay, whenever that service is being used somewhere in any component, user created component, then it will look for the value inside the constructor. If it is a hello service or a hero service, it will go to the injector, it will find that instance and it will inject it at runtime when application is running in the browser. Okay, so there is couple of syntaxes how we can basically use this injector in some scenarios, right? We don't want to make a service across the application. We don't have to we don't want to make the service available across the application. I want a service to be available inside only module where it was created. So in those cases, we can change this provider in syntax. Basically, we can remove this. We can remove the entire object from here. Just add that injectable and the brackets, the round brackets, right? The parentheses. That's it. Now this service is injectable, but it doesn't know where to inject. Like it doesn't know the context, either to make it available across the application or whether to make available across the module or to only single component. It doesn't know, right? So we are not providing any injector configuration. So in that time, in those cases, what we can do is we can go to the ng module file, the module file, and look for this section, provider section, and add your service. Okay, if you have n services, you can add by comma separated. So meaning of this is that you are making this service available only in this module. Okay, let me open the code and show. If you see, I have ng module and I have providers array as empty. Okay, now you can also open your app module.ts and see this will be empty. Either it will be empty or it will not be there. Okay, so this is an optional operator. Okay, so that's the reason it might not be available in feature modules, but at least in app module it will be available when you create the Angular application. So here in this you can mention the class. And one more another difference is when you create a component or directive, you are adding here, right? So you are adding the component and directive. Even the pipe also you can add here, but you cannot add a service here. Service is a different concept, right? So service will be basically a pure TypeScript class, and it doesn't need any configuration except the injectable decorator. And after that, if you provide root, provider in colon root, then you don't have to define here. But if you remove that provider in configuration from there, then you can mention the service name here this way. So what we are telling to Angular, make this service instance available only in app module. So this cannot be accessed outside of this module. Let's say I have some other module, student module or something. Okay, so I cannot use this service there because I did not provide the provider in configuration. Okay, let me remove this. So it will look like this. So I did not, this is perfectly valid. So it's not complaining any errors, right? So Angular will not know the context of this service. Now I have provided it in here, right? So now it is able to inject this service inside the app component. So wherever like you define this service, right? This is app module, right? You can access basically this service in all the component directives, pipes you add here. Okay, in the declaration section. Config. Okay, some error is showing, but it's compiling successfully. Okay, so yeah, so if you provide your services here, then it will be available across all the components directives defined in the declaration section. So that is one syntax. And the other thing is you don't want to make it available across your application. Okay, you don't not only application, the module, you don't want to make this service available across all the components in this module. You want the service to be accessible only in app component. So in that case, you can look for, if you press control space, it will show all the suggestions. Okay, now I can look for providers. Okay, providers is an array where I can mention the example service. It compiles successfully. Now this service instance is available only in this class. Okay, if you try to use this in some other place, it will work, but this instance or this object is different, and the object you are going to use in other component, that is different. So basically you cannot share data between these two components. Okay, so if the instance is same, then only you can share data. If instance is different, it will be difficult to share data across components. Okay, so that is the injector syntax about this injector syntax. Okay, so if provider is root, you don't have to do anything. It will work across your application, across your modules. But you want to make it available only to specific module, you can remove this part, the middle part, and then put that inside the providers array so that it will be available in that ng module. Or if you want it to be available only in specific component, remove from here also, just add in that component as a providers list. Okay, then this instance will be available only to this component. Okay, to make it available in other components, you can basically add provider section that component and add this one. So it doesn't mean that we are not going to reuse it. We can reuse it, but the only difference is the instance or the object created by Angular will be different for this component and different for that component. Okay, that's the different. So now, how to create a service? Just like how we created a pipe component and directive, we can create a service with this syntax. The short version is nggs and the service name. So here I created an alert service. So the alert service, once I created, it will create an empty class and it will add the decorator, and by default it will add the provider in as root. Okay, and then an empty constructor will be added, just like how other component and directory will be created, right? Now let's add some methods which can be reusable across multiple components. So I just added these two methods to this class. Okay, show warning, it will show an alert, and it will prefix an error string, and then whatever error message coming, right, it will just add and it will show an alert. And for success, it will just alert with a success prefix and then the message from where this service is called. Okay, now to use that service, we have to use the constructor injection. Okay, so this is called constructor injection. In TypeScript, we saw how to define a fields or parameters in the TypeScript, right? In the constructors, right? So the same way, we can add a service and we don't have to worry about anything else like creating a new object or injecting the service into constructor. Okay, all these things we don't have to do anything. We just have to add the variable name. You can maybe change it to public or protected depending on your use case. And then the type is the service type, okay, alert service. So now this instance will be available across your component class. Okay, if we take this example here, I created a component and I did not provide here the provided URL. Sorry, the providers, because the provider in configuration is root level configuration, right? So I don't have to add anything. Now this service can be available across my module and across the application, not module. Okay, so now the alert service is injected here. See, I didn't add any other syntax or any other decorators or anything else. I just created a service here and I just injected a service here. Now I can call that service with this reference, the alert service dot the show warning. Show warning is this method. Okay, the same way show success. So now let's say in the template, if I call this method, this will in turn call the show warning with this message. Okay, so finally what we will see, error colon alert colon error occurred. In case of this, it will show success colon app loaded successfully. This I am calling in ng on in it. So whenever this application is loaded, immediately it will call this method, show success method. So any questions or like any doubts here in creating service and using it?
No.
This is very simple from the at least the development point of view. Creating a service and using it is very simple. Yeah, I think this part I already covered. Registering a service in component and registering a service in module, and self-registering with the provider in attribute, right? So I still have to finish this documentation, even this one also. So let's do this example. Okay, let's do hands-on of this example, and we'll close the session today. I'll have to close this today little early. I have some other work. Okay, so let's do the hands-on part.
So we need to create a service, right?
Yes, exactly. We need to create a service and we need to create a component also. We already have app component. We can use that service in app component, but basically we are going to cover how to share data between multiple components with same service, right? So for that case, we can create another component also. Ng generate service. Okay, I think I already have it, right? Let me add the two methods. Example service show warning, and this is the message, and this is of type string. Okay, now let me show some alert. Let me print something here. Console.log in show warning method. And I'm showing the message. Then let me show the alert. Error. Yes, message. Show success. Success measure. Success. In app component, show success, and this will call example service dot. Now it will show the methods available in the service. Show success. See the success message. Show warning. This is a warning message. Okay. Now let me go to the template. Yes. Oh, so now they're showing two lines.
Mhm.
If I click on show success, it will show it appended a success and it's a success message. If I show on warning error, this is a warning message. Okay.
Mhm.
So now let's remove this method also. We don't need this method also. We don't need this method also. Okay, I removed everything. So there are no methods in it. Now let's call the service from the template itself. Okay, a template once click event is triggered. I'm taking the example service reference from the app component. Okay, so now at least so far we learned any variable defined either as a field or as a constructor variable, it can be accessible inside the template, right? So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm accessing the component field, and then component field it has some methods because the example service is a class TypeScript. So it has a method. I'm calling that method directly here, and I'm passing the message here. I think we have to change this to single quotes because if outside the double quotes and inside a double quotes, then it will not process properly because it will think the string is ended here, and this will be out of scope. So if you are using double quotes outside, then you should use single quotes inside. If you are using single quotes outside, you can use double quotes inside. Okay. Now, yeah, it compiled successfully. Let me copy this one also, showing warning. Example service show warning. Let me remove this. Okay, here also I have to use outside a double quotes. Let me use single quotes inside. Okay, perfect. See, same output. There is no difference. Okay. Sometimes it might complain. I think here it is complaining. Property example service is a private and only accessible within the class. Okay. Any private property is available within the class, right? That much we learned. So it is complaining. In order to avoid that, make it public. So now example service public so that it can be easily accessible inside the template. Now the error is gone.
Mhm.
That is just a warning. It's not error. Now there is no change in the output. Now let's create an input variable. Into warning message. Ng model. Let me use the same name. is complaining this is not available on app component. So let's create it. It is of type string. Let me remove this. Okay. Now let me see if it is getting printed or not. Why it is not working? It's not showing any error also. Something is wrong. Okay, I think something is wrong. Okay, I think I did not add form module. Oh, I added here. Module class. Why? I think something wrong with my Angular setup. That's why it's errors are coming.
Mm.
Okay, I think something wrong with my setup. Okay. So normally I thought of showing once this field is bound to this input. So whatever you type basically can be sent to the service and that message can be shown dynamically. Okay. That's what I thought, but it's not working. Okay, now let's create another component. Okay, we'll leave this part. Okay, we'll do it later. So let's create another component. ng generate component. Let me create it in components directory. Components slash test. Test is my component name. Okay. It created a component folder. Inside that, it created a test component. Okay. Now let me go here and let me use that service. public example service colon example service. That's it. Here I can basically do this dot es dot show success. Welcome. Okay. So now nothing is happening regardless of our service call is inside ng on init, right? So basically ng on init will be called whenever the test component is initialized, right? But in this case, it's not calling this because uh, when we are on this root path, that means there are no routes defined, right? So in the root path, by default, it is showing the app component, right? But we have to configure this one to basically initialize. Like whenever this component is being rendered in the web page, that time itself, this method will be called, not every time. If you have 100 components, 100 components will might have this ng on init method. That doesn't mean the 100 components will call this ng on init when the Angular is initialized, right? So when only the component, the specific component is initialized, then only this lifecycle methods will be called. So now let's go to the app routing module. Here let's define a route. Okay, this is how we do the rendering, right? Or we can just remove this. In order to use that component, we can just go to the component ts file and take this app test and go to the app component html, and I can basically use the test here. Okay. See, now it is coming, the hello from test. Okay, if I comment this, it will not come because that component is not initialized yet. So when I'm using it, it will get initialized either this way, or if I define that component in routing file, and that time that routine is invoked, and the app test component will be rendered. So that time the onInit method will be called. Okay. So this is one thing. So now let's create some static variable, not static, some instant variable here. Let me call it test field, or let me call it name of type string. Okay. Now it will basically show the name let me call it message set message this dot message equals message. Okay, and show message, and I'm not passing anything, I'm just showing alert message this dot message. Okay, whatever comes into this one. So now what we'll do is we will set this message from one component, and then we will use that message set by other component in the other component. Okay, success does not exist because we deleted it. Let me remove this. Okay, let me call set message instead. Let me create this set message method in here. Set message, and inside let me call example service. Okay. What I'm doing, I'm just, let me remove this. I'm just calling the set message method from app component, and in this one I'm calling the example services set message. I'm setting this message. Okay, so here basically I'm setting this message. Now from the test component, okay, let me remove this. From test component, we already have this ES variable public. Let me go to the test component dot HTML, and let me call the ES dot show message. Okay, so now what I did, I created a variable inside the example service, here the message string, and I wrote two methods. One is to set this message with whatever calling component is sending. Okay, I'm sending some data from the app component. I'm setting it in this variable, and I'm using the same data set by the app component in the test component. Okay, by calling this method, I'll be able to alert the message set by app component. It is happening, but we are not able to see it. If I refresh it, it will happen. See, the message is undefined because we did not set that message. Once I click on this, that time only the message will be set. See, let me do one thing. Let me create a boolean variable. Let me call it flag boolean. Okay. By default, it will be false. When I set this message, star flag equals to true. Here, let me use the ng if star ng if. Okay, show this component only when the flag is true. Okay, I should create this snap component. Sorry, app component, and this dot flag equal to true, and let me remove this flag to here. Okay, you see the test works was coming here, but it is not coming now because the ng if the flag is false, right? So that's why the component is not showing here. But when I click on this, I'm setting the message first and then making the flag true. So the message will be set to the service and then flag set to true. Once flag set to true, this component will be rendered in the browser. Once it is rendered, this method will be called. from the same instance, because the injector will inject same instance into the both components. Let me try that. See, now after I click on OK, the left side here, the TestWorks template string will come. Basically, we should not call any methods from the template directly using this interpolation, okay? Because the template will be refreshed many number of times whenever a data changes. That's the reason even if I'm clicking like multiple times, it's not going, because the keep on refreshing and it keep on calling this method. If I remove this, it will just go away. Okay, it's better to call it from the ng on init. Yeah, this is perfect. See, it will work only one time now. Only when the TestWorks is initialized, this method is called, and it will call the show message. The show message will have the reference of the message, and which was set by this method from app component. So you now understood what is the difference, right? Not difference, how to use these services. Now, if I remove this ng injectable, the provider root configuration, let's see what will happen. See, it is throwing errors. I just removed the provider in root. In browser, it compiled successfully. Syntactically, it is correct, but at runtime, it is throwing error. So what is the error? No provider for example service. So we did not provide any provider. So now let's copy this and go to app module and mention this in the provider section. Okay. Now compile successfully. If I go to the browser, it will work because we are providing the example service inside the app module. So this service instance will be available across this app module. It will not be available in other modules, but at least it will be available in this module. Okay, there is no difference in the functionality. Now I can remove from here. Okay, now let's provide inside the components. Providers is an array. Inside I am providing this one. Okay, now let me copy this and go to test component, and here let me see what will happen if I don't provide in other component. I providing in one component but not providing other component. Still it is working. Save this one. Save this one. Let me provide it here. See that, did you observe the difference now? I provided component level service. So here I provided in the provider section, and in test component also I provided example service. Now if you see the output, when I click on this, the message is coming as undefined. Okay, but in app component, when we click on the set message, we are setting the message. Okay, but when it is trying to access in test component, from here it is not finding this message because now there are two instances created of example service, like two objects created for example service created by the injector framework from the Angular. Okay, so the instance assigned to this component is different and the instance assigned to the app component is different. So that is the reason we are setting a message, but we are setting a message in this object, which is assigned to the app component, right? So in that object, we are setting the message. But here in test component, there is a different instance of example service in which the message is undefined. Message is basically null. It doesn't have any value. Let me assign null here. See, it is showing null because there was no data assigned in a different object. We are assigning from app component in app component service version, but in test component, there is a different version, different instance completely. So there is no way the data set in that object is accessible in this object. Okay, that is the difference with the providers. So providers are like there are three ways you can inject a service. One is app provider in root level. If it is a root level, it will be available across the modules and across the application. If you provide in app module, then it will be available across this module only. If there is a new module you created, it will not be accessible there. Okay. And the third way is providing inside the component. So if you provide this service in any component inside this component decorator, so that many instances of this service will be created. Okay, and each will be different. Each will be different. You cannot share data between two components because this instance and that instance of services are completely different. Okay, so any questions so far? I think we are over the time. We're good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Now let me go to the browser and UI training. Okay, this is where I deployed it. UI-training. I'll share this link. Okay, you can go to the Angular section. You can click on the Get Started, and here, if you go to the services, you'll have the documentation. Okay, documentation and examples also.
Okay.
Okay, the same way there's documentation for all the content we covered so far.
Okay.
For components, everything is in single place. Okay, let me push this change also. Basically, if you click on this introduction to components, sorry, so all the content will be available here. So I'll be fixing this issue, but meanwhile you can start working on the services part. Okay, this rest of the documentation is not added yet. Okay, as we go with the next sessions, I'll keep on adding. Okay, till here the content is there, and after that there is no content. Okay, I'll share this and I'll share the video also. Okay, if no questions, I think we can close the session today, and tomorrow we can continue on subjects and observables. Okay, yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.